everyone. Welcome to What They Can't See. My name is Paige Ditommaso, and today I'm here with my co-host, Mike Mello. Today, we're going to dive deeper into my specific journey with epilepsy. Mike and I both realized that we haven't really told you all about our own journeys with chronic conditions. So today, we're going to talk about my condition, and at a later episode, we will talk about Mike's. We hope you guys enjoy. Please like, follow, and subscribe to our channel. This podcast is for informational purposes only and is not medical advice, as we are not licensed medical professionals. Please consult your healthcare provider for personalized medical guidance.
So, Paige, in our previous podcasts, we've referenced a lot of our conditions. And I think it'd be important for our listeners to hear today, from the beginning when you were first diagnosed until where you're at now, what that has looked like, what your condition is, and maybe we can just kind of have a flowing conversation about your diagnosis and about where you're at, because I think it's important for going forward when we do reference times in our lives or things that have happened with our condition, our listeners will be able to put that together. So first and foremost, when were you diagnosed? What was going on? What was happening? What led to that diagnosis?
Yeah, so just a shout out to all my epilepsy and seizure disorder people. This is my diagnosis. I was diagnosed when I was 8 years old. I had a grand mal seizure, and that was the first seizure that I'd had. It was a total shock. I had a very typical, normal, if you will, upbringing up until 8. There were no signs of any condition. I was ahead when it came to walking and talking, right? I was on track for all that stuff. And then one day I just had this seizure, and my sister and I slept in the same bedroom at that time. So she noticed that I was on the ground and not, responsive. And so she went and got my parents and brought me to the hospital. They thought that it would maybe be a one-time thing, because 1 in 10 people in their lifetime will have a seizure, and it doesn't mean that they have a disorder or they don't have necessarily epilepsy. So they said, well, just, hopefully this was a one-time thing. And then it was not. So I started having focal seizures, which focal just means that they start in one spot. So there's one spot in my brain that the seizures start in. So they started off as smaller seizures, just kind of located in one part of the brain, which means that the seizure was impacted by that one spot. So for example, in my case, that they found a cyst about the size of a golf ball in my brain, and it was surrounded by scar tissue, and that scar tissue was lying on my sensory and motor cortex in my brain, which is everything like sensation and motor movement. And so also very specifically the part that controlled my lip and my fingertips on the right side of my body. So it's really intricate, but so I would get these seizures that were tingling sensations in those two parts, or then my eyes would get involved. So it was really interesting how it would just start in one spot, thinking of a seizure as a little fire in the brain. There's a lot of neurons firing and firing. And that was kind of where that seizure started, and then it would grow or it would stay small. So I just kind of want to put out there real quick too, to simplify this, is that everybody with a seizure disorder or epilepsy, and if you're listening and you are one of those people, you know this. And if not, and you're just being educated, this is a beautiful way to understand epilepsy, is that no two cases are the same. So everybody has different seizures, different presentation, different auras, which are a small precursor maybe to, or a warning signal to a seizure. We all present differently and have different types of seizures. So no two cases are the same.
I appreciate your vulnerability in talking about all this. But when you first had that seizure, when you were 8 years old, you were saying it was completely out of the blue. Was this at night? Was it in the morning, during the day? What kind of was happening at that time?
Yeah, it was just early in the morning. Like my dad was getting ready for work. Like, it was just that typical morning. We were still asleep and that was really the day. I don't remember much except for waking up to the EMTs in my bedroom. Like
Mm,
and not really having any idea of what happened, right? Like I didn't know what was going on. And I didn't necessarily see it as bad either, right? Like it wasn't really traumatic for me. Like it was a trauma, right? We have traumas, but traumas can either evolve into something that's traumatic to us or not. Like it wasn't that traumatic, if that makes sense. Like it didn't
mhm.
impact me in that way. I just was confused, right? And I was tired. I remember being tired and I just remember seeing like these guys up in front of me like just making sure that I was okay and safe.
Mm. And then after that, what was it like? Was it a seizure every day, seizure every week, monthly, every, couple months? What was it like after that first instance?
Sure. So um my what I remember from my childhood with epilepsy, like early childhood, so like maybe 8 to 13, let's say. Um, and there are some moments that I remember more than others, so I will say that. Was especially early on, we were trying to figure out, do I need medication? Do I not? And eventually I started having small seizures at school. So I knew when they were coming, which is a blessing. Anybody who knows epilepsy, like some people just drop. Like there's no warning, you just have a seizure. Other people do have what I had mentioned before, which is called an aura. That's almost this warning signal or precursor to like, hey, you should probably relax or you're going to have a seizure, get to the ground, right? There's this warning signal. So thankfully I had that. We had let my nurse know and it like the school nurse, right? And my teacher. And so I would like let my teacher know and she'd walk me out into the hallway and she'd help me through that little episode or whatever it was. And then I'd re-enter class when it was over. Um, or if it was, like, bad, then they would just send me home. But that's kind of what I remember, and then I also remember being in school and having a little bit of trouble because we were trying these medications, and, like, sometimes they would make me super dizzy or, or really, really tired. So, the adjustment period to figuring out, 1, what medication worked best, and 2, how that was going to impact me when we would say, like, go up in the dosage of it to try to control the seizures that was always it there was always a little adjustment period there. Um,
Mhm.
yeah,
And now, were all of the seizures grand mal seizures? You referenced the focal, was it focal seizures or focal?
right.
I don't remember which
Yeah,
one you
so
used.
so there are so many kinds of seizures. I would think there's over 40 different types.
Wow.
So what's interesting about that is that anybody who has epilepsy, we can relate to each other because we know what comes with seizures and the like life stressors and the way it impacts us. But at the end of the day, there are over 40 types and people might not experience all of that. We most likely have only experienced one or two. Some people maybe theirs evolves and mine has evolved. So when I was younger, I was having the focal, which is the best way to say it, I feel like, is that it's localized, so it only impacts certain parts of your body. Like, I think people think a seizure is that grand mal seizure that you've seen on TV or you've seen it in the hospital shows where someone starts seizing and they're just going crazy. That's really not the case. They range from anybody just like having a staring spell, like they'll just stare out into space and not even realize that that's a seizure, right? They're just almost like they would describe it as like losing time. Like all of a sudden they go out into space and then they wake up and their teacher is on the other side of the room and they missed like half the lesson of the day, right? So there's that type. And then it ranges all the way to yes, grand mal seizures which impact the entire body. So for me they started off localized, which really just and that's focal, which really just impacted a couple parts of my brain. And then as I got older, it spread more. So it almost got worse, right? It got worse in terms of the intensity of the seizure or the amount of my brain that it impacted. So to be clear, the more of your brain that it impacts, the more intense, I will say, like the seizure is. So it will be more of a grand mal seizure if, let's say, that fire of a seizure spreads throughout your entire brain. Does that make sense?
Yeah, 100%. So the first time that you ever had a seizure, it was a grand mal seizure when you were
Yeah.
8 years old. And then from there, it was more of the focal seizures in school, in class, maybe on the soccer field if you were playing at that time.
Ooh, this
Um,
girl never had a seizure on the soccer field.
wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, not to completely switch gears here, but that's interesting because soccer is a very active, like intense cardio sport. And so you're exerting a lot of effort
Yeah.
on the soccer field. And so that never led to you having a seizure. That's very interesting.
This is the coolest story. Like in my like this is something that's so cool to talk about for me because I soccer was my medicine. Like that was I always
Mm.
thought of it as like part of my medicine. Because I was always confident and entrenched in that sport and loving and nurturing it, and it allowed me don't get me wrong, soccer's stressful, but for me, it was like my happy place. So the field was this almost escape from that. And so it was the most beautiful thing to have an outlet like that. And to just have something to love and to nurture, and I put so much time and effort in to that game and always worked my hardest. Like I was the girl that was playing midfield, like there was no lack of running and effort. So um, you know, that to me, I loved it. I loved it as a kid. And I'm so grateful that I never had a seizure on the field. As it evolved, like you're asking like how this evolved over time. Um, as I moved into high school, my seizures did start to get a little bit worse. So they would generalize more, is what we call it. Like it would move into new parts of my brain. So like my head would start turning up, and there was like it wasn't a grand mal seizure, but they were very. They had the same characteristic every single time. It would look like the same thing, and they would happen at night. So really, I would wake up and it would be like 1 o'clock in the morning. Boom, seizure. So did soccer impact? I don't know, like, the exertion, if maybe after if I wasn't hydrated enough and that night I just said it I don't know, I don't know the answer, but I never had one on the field, and I'm very grateful
Hmm,
for that,
sure.
yeah.
Yeah. So if you can take us through a little bit of what it looked like progressing throughout your life. So 8 years old, excuse me, you had this grand mal seizure. They found that you had a cyst on your brain, right? Did they immediately, when they found that, go in and remove it? Was it something that they were just going to monitor and give you medications for until maybe it progressed to get worse? Like, take us a little bit through that.
Sure. Maybe the best way to put it is that what ended up happening is my life became a little bit more intentional in that we had to, and by we, I mean family, like my parents, my siblings, we really had to consider so many things um, because epilepsy is, it comes with a lot more than just having a seizure. There are a lot of triggers, a lot of ways that we have to learn to listen to our body. So for me, now it became, okay, Paige, did you hydrate enough? Did you have proper nutrition? Did you get good sleep last night? Am I in a good sleep routine? How is the stress level? Right? There were a bunch of factors that we were all kind of monitoring after it became a part of our life for real. So now that we're moving into, okay, yes, she has this diagnosis. We have to figure out what the right combination of medication is. Did you take your medicine? Right? There's like all of the questions um, and all of that monitoring going on to try to make sure that I was as safe and as well off as possible. And as I moved through, let's say, high school, maybe no, middle school too, middle school and high school, um, there were certain trends that we'd see. So, like for example, it was almost like every 3 months on the dot that I would have a breakthrough seizure, which meant a full seizure. So I would have we called them like tingles, which were the auras. So like the tingling in my lip or in my fingers, I would have those every once in a while, like I do now. Like they'd pop up every few days or whatever. But the breakthrough seizure, which really led to this full um episode where my head would turn up to the side and I was really out of control of my body, whether I was awake or like I should say aware, right? Aware of what was going on, or if I was really like knocked out or passed out during it, that would happen almost 3 months on the dot every time. So, anybody here, any listeners who have any knowledge of or are going through epilepsy kind of know what I am talking about when I say we almost have this clock that we're always and it's kind of unfortunate because we're almost anticipating it, and that's not helpful either. But everybody kind of has their own uh, seizure tendencies or patterns, and so that was mine.
Got it. Got it. Okay. That's super helpful. And if you don't mind, can you maybe briefly describe the difference between a breakthrough seizure versus grand mal versus focal? Because I know you just referenced breakthrough seizure. How is that maybe different?
Yeah, no, I want to be able to convey this well. So an aura is that warning signal that we talked about. Those are usually focal. A seizure in general is when we have these neuron so we have these neurons in our brain, right? And they're trying to send signals to each other and connect well, right? Like if I want to move my arm up to the side, there's a whole process that happens where we have a neuron come in and it connects to another neuron, which are the neurons in our brain. They're sending electrical impulses through our brain to help us do anything and everything we do in our life. So that signal is sent. Like, let's say I want to raise my hand. The signal is sent. My brain receives it. Okay, let's raise our hand. And it's sent back out to my hand so that my hand actually moves up. So we have all these beautiful networks and connections in our body that help us to do our everyday activities or any movement at all. So what happens in a seizure is that that neuron connection, like our body sends a signal and the other neuron is waiting to receive that signal, but it can't connect. It's not connecting. So the signal gets sent again and again and again, and it's not being connected. So it starts this little fire. And wherever that fire starts in our brain is where that seizure usually begins. It's different for everybody, but I'm going to put it like this. For example, because the scar tissue on my brain was in that specific area of the sensory and motor cortex for my lip and my fingers, my seizure would always begin there. And so if that signal just came and went and I just got the tingling sensation and it came and it went, that's an aura or a focal seizure because it's only that fire is only happening in one very small area of the brain. Now, when that signal gets sent and the fire grows and spreads throughout our brain, so it might spread for me, like it would spread to my neck because my neck would start turning. And then it would spread maybe to my arms because my arms would get really stiff. Then, then as it moves, that's when it generalizes, which means now it's like it's impacting more of my brain, right? And that for me would cause what's called a breakthrough seizure, where it's not just a tingle anymore. It's impacting so much more, and I'm not conscious. I'm not able to do anything about it, right? If I was driving a car, we'd be really having an issue. Whereas like the focal seizures, I can have a tingling sensation and still operate a vehicle. I don't operate vehicles just for like I don't do that on a day when I'm having auras, just to be clear. But that's the difference, right? The awareness. And again, I'm not a doctor, so I know that I'm missing information here, right? Like I'm not a wealth of knowledge on exactly how to define each of these terms, but I hope that that's helpful. I hope that's helpful because, and then, so generalized means it's moving into more of my brain. And that means that it usually will be a breakthrough seizure. And for me now in my life, the breakthrough seizure, so when it gets more intense and impacts more of my brain, that is what we call, so it's a breakthrough seizure. but it's also moved into what's called tonic-clonic, or now they're kind of calling it like a grand mal seizure because it is so impactful where I'm losing consciousness. I'm not aware of what's going on around me. So it has progressed as I've gotten older.
Gotcha. It sounds like in if I'm trying to make a little bit of sense of this, it sounds like what you're referring to, the breakthrough is it breaks through from an aura into more of a seizure, if I'm making sense of that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. Thank you
Okay.
for simplifying that for me.
Sure. I just was trying to
No, seriously, because I get into the nitty-gritty, but that is the best
sure.
way to describe it.
And then it sounds like the grand mal seizure is like the full blown, type seizure that we see in the movies like you referenced before.
Right.
Got
And
it.
again,
Okay.
everybody's might look a little different because of
Sure.
what parts of the brain it's impacting, but yes, that is that
Okay.
breakthrough where your entire body's impacted and you can't do anything about it and you're out.
Sure. And so you were saying how it progressed from when you were 8 until middle school and high school, and then you get to college. Where were you at in college, post college? How did it progress kind of from there? And then if you can, or if you feel comfortable, where are you kind of at now with all of this?
Sure. Loaded questions.
I
Yes.
know.
So I will say I had 3 every 3 months I would have a seizure all the way through my brain surgeries, which I can get to. But throughout my life, it became pretty stable. And Fred, he's here with us and he's my brother. So he can probably speak a little more to this because sometimes things get blurry to me. But you know, it was every 3 months I'd have the breakthrough seizure, and if there were some off days, I'd rest or, maybe I'd have to adjusting to school, for example, right? All of a sudden, you're getting up at 6 o'clock in the morning going to high school, and, you're trying to adjust to that schedule, and also then you've got soccer practice after school, and you gotta do all your homework, and then you gotta get up and do it again. Like, so the adjustment to school was always a difficult one. That's a good example of something that's like everybody does, but I had a little bit of a different experience in adjusting to it, right? So that was impacted, but I do feel like the routine is helpful, right? I would suggest to anyone with epilepsy, if you're having trouble, start a routine. Like adjust to a routine. So it's like a helpful tip because it helps bring some normalcy to our life and our body, and our body gets used to a certain clock and a certain routine, and that's helpful. So I would eventually adjust, but it took me like a couple weeks. So, for the first like week or two of school, I'd be like in the nurse's office, like every once in a while to like take a little nap or just rest for a few minutes just to kind of catch up on some sleep and stuff like that.
Let me ask you real quick, not to
Yeah.
butt in here, but in those situations, was that on your own, like, hey, I need to go to the nurse, or was that before you started school, set this up to make sure that you're going to be set up for success?
Sure. So and this is, this is a good insight for school in general, is I did have to learn how to advocate for myself and say, hey, I'm feeling really tired or, yeah. And I would go to the nurse. And again, like my school nurses, this is really important. If you have any kind of condition like this, it could be epilepsy, something different. Um, it is so helpful. Like if you're in high school or middle school, it's so helpful to have your nurse, your school nurse on your side in terms of like inform them, like let them know about your condition. And also having an emergency action plan is so helpful. So she had this, okay, if Paige has a seizure, this is what I do. And there's a protocol. So like my parents wrote it, typed it out and gave it to the nurse, and she had it with my emergency or rescue medication locked in a box in her room so nobody else could use that medication. And if it ever needed to be used, she knew exactly what to do and exactly where to go. And then there was that medication that if it needed to be administered, then she was qualified to do that and was given permission to do that. So I would highly recommend that if you are dealing with a condition that involves some sort of emergency, even like EpiPens, like anybody with any allergies, right? That if you have someone in your school that can support you, like your school nurse, to let them know. So I would go and I knew, one, I had to go there to take my afternoon meds anyways, because at this time in my life, I was taking meds in the morning, in the middle of the day, and night because they would make me so tired that we had to spread them out. So, then I don't recommend that for everybody because it's not too realistic in life to have to stop and do that throughout the day. And we did find a solution for that. So, but at that time, it was like, okay, so I'd go at lunchtime anyways. We were on that first name basis. She asked me how I'm doing, right? Like all the good stuff. Usually the school nurses are pleasant. I encourage you to create a relationship with the nurse. And anyone else, like even your teachers, if you're comfortable letting some people know, like if you know you're more vulnerable to a seizure right in the morning, maybe your first period class teacher should, or your homeroom teacher should be aware of it. Again, that's just for you to process and you to decide. Not everybody needs to know that you have this condition if you don't want that. But I'm just suggesting that there are people that can be in your corner to help you out. Um, so yeah, but to answer your question, Mike, I really did have to advocate for myself and also understand, ooh, you're like really tired or you're dizzy right now. Let's go visit Mrs. So and so and she'll help you just like chill for 10 minutes until it passes. So I did have to recognize when my body was not feeling good. Yeah.
Wow. Well, it's something that we can, definitely get into at some point because I think it's very impressive as a middle and high schooler to be that aware. And I know obviously you were forced into that, right? Like you didn't have a choice. Like if I'm feeling tired, if I'm feeling dizzy, I know I need to go do that. Right. But I think that's not easy for a high schooler to become so in tune with their body at a younger age to recognize those things, right? And obviously, you had been living with it for a while, so a lot of that came with time. But I think that's impressive. So then, take us through after high school, into college, post college. How did it progress? You were saying that every 3 months this was kind of happening. You were kind of having a seizure, like to the day or hour or whatever. How did it kind of progress from there?
And, just to touch on that point of it being quote like impressive, right, Mike? Like I appreciate that. I also know that it was just part of my life. Like not everybody is diagnosed when they're really young, but it just very quickly became a part of our lives. By that I mean our entire family, where it just needed to be done. So I didn't trust me, there were times where I really felt like this was a disadvantage, a weakness, something really difficult. But also I knew like, okay, I'm in my class. I can't even look at the board without feeling like I'm going to fall over. Like I need to go to the nurse, right? So I think like to that point, my body, I feel very fortunate that my body just told me, "Hey, you gotta go lay down." Because there are a lot of times, and I find myself doing this more now than I ever did when I was younger, that I would I didn't really have the opportunity to push myself to my breaking point where and of course I always ended up kind of doing that because every 3 months it would, you know, build up. And I think the way my dad described it best was I'd be burning the candle at both ends. So if anyone knows what that means, like you're just like, I'm gonna do this and I'm gonna do that. And I just did too much until I was burnt out and then it would accumulate into this episode. And so the other thing to note about that too is I don't have all the answers now. I don't know why it happened every 3 months. I don't think I'll ever know. You know what I mean? Like, was it that we burned the candle at both ends and it caused it, or was my body just on this clock? I don't know the full answer. But to your point, to even circle back, because I know I just got on a little tangent there, but you know, I do give myself some credit for being able to understand when my body needed rest or needed to take a break. I also know that me being a very ambitious slash sometimes stubborn person would push myself and want to be able to do everything that everyone else was doing. And not everyone else, I shouldn't say that. Most other people were doing. Um, I wasn't ever like ashamed of well, that's not true. I actually shouldn't say that. Um, I'll say that I never let epilepsy keep me from doing something I wanted to do there were certain things that we were like, that's probably not in your best interest. Like sleepovers, never did them. Things like that. It would have set me up for a bad day the next day. So there were things that um or Paige needs nap time. That's a classic. Okay. Like let's do that, let's do that. Um and those were things that sometimes I was like, "No, mom and dad, I can do it. I can push through it." And we were all like, "No, you probably should go take a little break." Okay. So there were things I wanted to push through. I wasn't perfect with that. Um yeah. Now I'm getting really onto a tangent there.
But I think, this is an important kind of topic, right? Like in high school, you're surrounded by teachers, you're surrounded by your nurse, like you have people to go to, and then you go off to college. And a lot of this is kind of on your own, right? Like, yes, they have, uh, medical buildings and they have doctors on campus and stuff, but it's much larger school where you don't get kind of that individualized treatment unless you really, build a relationship with people. But how did that progress? How did your condition progress? How did you navigate that? Because now you're really into kind of adulthood and you're taking a lot of this on your own.
Yeah. No, you know what? College, oh, I love so it's been 10 years since I graduated college this year, which makes me feel so old. um, but I will say college was such a positive experience for my epilepsy and for me as an individual. And here's why. One, yes, all the responsibility was on me. So to get up in the morning and take my meds, and then at night, take my med, right? Like medicine is super important for anyone who has epilepsy. Like you miss a dose, yikes. You're looking at let's take the whole day easy. I mean, like you don't know what you're looking at. It's very sketchy. So, yes, was more responsibility. And also like I was coming in as a freshman playing soccer. So we had all of preseason in the heat with like 2 to 3 practices a day and trying to keep up with all that competition, right? Like there was so much going on and it was amazing. Like I loved it. There was an adjustment, right? Like you miss your parents or you miss your the certainty of where you're at. There's new environment, new people, you're trying to make relationships. There's so many new factors when you go to college. Um, and then you start school and you have classes and you've got these homework assignments. I remember being like in the library till like 1 a.m. for one of my classes because this professor was so intense. Like, so you just, there's a lot of things that we're navigating in college. And of course, for me, soccer being my medicine, like I explained earlier, I just put all of my effort into that and love that sport so much. So, um, I will say though, what it did provide me was a lot of autonomy. So I was able to take ownership over all of it. And so, to your point of being able to understand your body and take breaks when you need to and advocate for your needs. Yes, very important. Um, I remember my athletic trainer, right? Every sports team has an athletic trainer in college. So, she knew about it. She was informed. She had my emergency meds, right? Or my emergency meds were always in my bag and it was well known. And almost all my teammates knew about it as well. I wasn't afraid to say something. All my roommates, I developed beautiful relationships with some of these girls who, like I had a roommate who my first roommate, I remember, she ended up becoming an RA. Like she was built for this job to have a roommate with like a disorder or disability, right? She was built for this. So when I did have seizures, she was like that first responder. She knew who to call. She knew what to do, right? And then she became an RA, so I had to find other roommates, so I roomed with some of my soccer player friends, and they each had their own designated job. So, like, if something happened, one of them who was not gonna watch it, she couldn't, she was the one that called campus safety and called 911. And then we had the other one who was, like, getting my emergency meds ready, and then right? So everybody kinda had their own job. I will say, what's really cool is in college I didn't have many seizures, and Imma say, like, I was, like, heavily drinking at times, like, there were some things that I was doing that would have never been advised by a doctor, um, And I think a big part of that was because I was able to just be. And I had this more of this freedom and autonomy to just exist in the world and to know that yes, I do need to take precautions. Like there were certain things that I did do to keep myself healthy, but also I was able to feel a little more free from my condition and just be Paige, to be
Mhm.
honest. So that was really beautiful to see that, I didn't really have many seizures on campus. I had 1, 2 that I can remember. But to have one every 3 months and for, like, hardly any of them to be at college was a big win.
Yeah, it sounds like it. I mean, that's it's interesting,
It is.
and I would love your perspective on this. When you say I was just able to be and exist and just be Paige, how much that influenced the seizures, right? Like how much, and I'm sure there must be some research or something that there's like a correlation between stress levels and the firing of signals and neurons in the brain. But I'm curious as to maybe from your perspective, why do you think that was?
Yeah, I think there are a lot of factors that play into that. Um, I think independence was really empowering and developing the skills to advocate for myself and to really trust the people around me. Um, and again, that's just because I built those relationships, but they never treated me like the girl with epilepsy. Does that make sense? Like, it was just this Paige. She's got this thing going on that we might need to attend to, but we're all just gonna go on living our life. And if something happens, it happens. She's gonna let us know.
Mhm.
Um, so that was really beautiful. And I think, a lot of people, and I've had a lot of people reach out to me wondering, "Hey, how did you navigate this? Or how did you navigate dating? How did you navigate, school, letting people know, like all this stuff?" And I just realized very quickly that when I went to college, when I like was able to develop that independence, I never thought of myself as any less than or any more like I'll just put it out there like this. Like I never thought I couldn't date someone because of my epilepsy, right? I was never like, "Oh, but how are they gonna take it?" I was like, "I can get any guy I want." And and I ended up with with the best one. But I'm just saying that like, I didn't let that mindset never really kept me from pursuing that or like I can take any class or be anything that I could be any profession I want to do, I can pursue that. Or any level of soccer I want to play. I like heavily before I tore my knee, like I heavily was like I want to keep playing after college. So there was nothing that I don't know if that makes sense, but I just never let that limit me in a way that made me feel bad about myself or made me feel less than or more incapable than anybody else. And I know that there are limitations that come with this. It's not that's not a it's not necessarily an accurate
Mhm.
assessment of the condition, but my mindset was very heavily focused on you can do anything. And that was really helpful. Um and I think maybe the difference that you might be looking for in this question of being free um is that I understand that parents and caretakers want the best for their children and that they're really trying their best to make sure that you're having a healthy life and that you're safe. Um, Moving and going to college or even moving to South Carolina for 3 years like we did, it put it on me and I didn't have anybody influencing the way I was thinking about myself. And I have the best parents and the best siblings in the world and they're amazing. And at the same time, there's responsibility that they feel that they had, right? There's extra layers to the environment that I'm living in because I am worried, like, did I take my medicine? Did I drink water? Right? There's more attention on the on the condition and how I'm doing and if I'm okay, right? Like things like that. So maybe that has something to do with the environment. Um, but I can't tell you that for sure.
Mhm.
It's definitely up in the air.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's just interesting, and I'm curious as to, if the what it sounds like you're talking about is this unwavering confidence in college of like, I can go play professionally, I can date any guy that I want, I can do anything that I want because I'm capable. And I think there's something very spiritual about that. Like, you believe it in your bones, in your entire being, that there's almost like some therapeutic medicine in that, where it's like, I am so much more and I am so powerful, that you're kind of like telling your brain and yourself like, hey, like, you got nothing on me right now, and I think that's so cool. Because I think it speaks
That's so
to a lot
true.
of I think it speaks to a lot of things, and not even just your condition, but a lot of conditions in general. Yes, it's hard. It's hard to have confidence, and it's hard to believe with everything in your being, but there's a lot of people talk about like their faith, and people that maybe go through the motions of their faith and just like show up to church or whatever might not feel or reap the benefits of what God's providing for us. But the people that are very spiritually involved, and they believe with every ounce of their body that there is a God up there, that there is, Jesus that's looking over us, that can provide and can do these things, you see that on the other side. And it might not be in a week, a month, a year, but like, it ends up happening in a way because there is God's plan for everybody, right? And so I think it's speaking a little bit to what you're saying, where like, you believe it so deeply in your body that it almost prevented those seizures from happening, right? So I think that's just speaking a little bit to what you were saying, and I appreciate everything you were talking about. Um, and to take us a little bit deeper and further, college sounded like this amazing time. And then you were speaking a little bit to, moving to South Carolina. Can you take us through after college? And I know you've had surgeries. If you want to take us maybe through some of those things, or not, and we could just wrap it there and call it a day. It's entirely up to you, and what you feel comfortable kind of talking about.
Yeah, you know what? I think this, like you said, to get a little deeper with it, right? We all have different phases of life. And I learned that quickly. College wasn't perfect, don't get me wrong, but like I could have a seizure. Like I had a seizure in preseason, I think my senior year, and I was playing 2 days later. If that happened today, we would not be we would not be on the field for maybe 3 months, like at the least amount.
Ooh.
And so I think what's important to note throughout the rest of my journey from college on is that mindset, yes, is very important and it's changed. Also, my body's changed. I'm 31. I'm going to be 32 in a few days. Like I'm older now and our bodies do develop. But I think one thing that you spoke to of like my confidence level and right, the way that I went about living was very different when I was younger than it is now. And I'm not saying that that's negative, but it is something I'd like to work on because something that does impact us is fear, guilt, shame as we grow older and we have more responsibilities. Like I've never had this much responsibility in my life. I'm just going to say like the biggest stressor in college was soccer. Like what a blessing, right? To like have a sport that you love playing be the biggest stressor in your life. Right? Then I graduated, I started coaching. My seizures started getting worse. I was now like entering the workforce. And so another responsibility, right? Or what am I going to do after this? Like there's more that comes into play that was those stressors because stress is my biggest trigger. So those stressors starting to kind of add up and pile up. All right, we got to find a new option here. And my God-given husband, Michael, he said, "Paige, did you know that you can get brain surgery? Like, have you ever looked into this option?" Because we had just been managing with medication, and with medications, and I could go on a tangent about this, but I won't. With medications, you get to a certain point where you know whether you can control or if you're going to stay uncontrolled. And I was at the point of uncontrolled. So we were like, well, what else can you try? So with the surgeries, it provided another opportunity. Can they go into the brain and take out the scar tissue that is causing the seizures to begin? That was the goal. And so it was not long after I graduated college that I, with 100% confidence, jumped into this. Hey, I want a better life. I don't want to be having a seizure every 3 months. I want to drive. I want to have a job, like all that stuff. So I'm going to jump into this. And like I had this zero negativity rule. You can't come into my room if you're going to cry or if you're upset. Like we're only positive here because this is making my life better. So this was the most painful, physically painful, not mentally painful, physically painful time in my life was going through these surgeries. I ended up having 2 craniotomies that were to take out that piece. So they had to go in and monitor it first and induce seizures and figure out where it was coming from. Then they went in for another 8-hour surgery and they did the resection, which is to take out. So they took out and removed only an ounce. It was like this much, like a grain of rice worth
Mhm.
of scar tissue. And then I actually ended up having a hematoma and a brain infection. So I had 2 more surgeries. I don't want this to scare anyone because I would never take back the decision to have the surgeries. And most people do not have complications the way that I did. Um, I don't know why that happened. I'll never know. And I'm not going to worry about that anymore because it happened and we took care of it and it's okay. It's okay now. But yes, I did end up having 4 brain surgeries over the course of 1 month and then proceeded to have a 1.5 to 2 year long recovery into getting back into being able to like go for a run and like pick up regular day activities. And it was definitely a longer recovery. Um, so once that happened, though, my seizures became less and less. So that's beautiful. Meaning I had more time before seizures or between seizures. So the longest amount of time that I went since then, again, it's been 10 years, was 4 years. And then I had like
four
3
years,
years. Hmm
4 years between seizures.
Yeah.
Wow.
So a really great improvement, right? More independence, more,
Mm.
I mean, there's no question. Like it
Mhm.
improved my life. So 4 years between, then I think there was 3 years, then I had 2, then 3, right? So like it was just like a mixed bag of it. And always they were always happening because they were provoked, meaning I pushed it
Mm.
way too hard. So
Got it.
it wasn't just like a clock like my other ones were. It was like, no, there's this, you took a kickboxing class and 4 days in a row and pushed yourself way too hard and it
Mhm.
happens, right? So, yeah, so they were definitely provoked in some way. Um,
Wow. I just want to quickly clear something up for our listeners. So, because you had mentioned at the beginning of the podcast that you had a golf ball sized cyst in your brain with scar tissue. So, when they went in for that first surgery after college, that's what they were removing.
right. So what they ended up doing was in the first surgery, they put a bunch of monitors directly on the brain. So if anyone's ever had like an EEG or some sort of brain like monitoring, they usually put it right on your scalp and they do it from like the outside. This was like taking that and putting it directly on the brain. So they were able
Wow.
to pinpoint exactly where the seizures were starting because then they provoked a seizure and like took me off my meds. And crazy enough, I didn't even I had 1 seizure on the last day. So like I was like superheroing, but at the same time I was like, "Hello, we need to have a seizure so they know what to take out." Um and so that gave them the knowledge of, hey, this is the specific area that is causing it. And at the same time, when they went in, so if a cyst is a fluid filled sac. So they extracted that fluid and then they found the spot, which was a piece of scar tissue. So it was like one area of the scar tissue. And they took out an ounce, but they weren't able to take everything they would have liked because we would have seen harder repercussions. Like I lost a lot of sensation in my hand and a lot of like feeling and even motor function, which I was able to regain the motor function and some of the sensation. But if they took more, they may have taken what you can't get back. Like,
Wow.
so you kind of have to weigh the pros and cons of like, what are you willing to lose? Are
Mhm.
you willing to lose the ability to talk? Because I'm not. And
Yeah.
so they didn't want, right? They didn't want to take more than what would have hurt my quality of life, which is probably why I've still had seizures as well, or at least part of the reason, because they weren't able to take everything that would have completely solved the problem, if that makes
Mhm.
sense.
Wow. Wow. And so I appreciate you clearing that up because I think it's helpful just for people to kind of understand. Um, so you go through these four surgeries. Obviously, a lot happened in that month span time, and then 4 years from that day that you had from when you had those surgeries. Was it after? Did you have any seizures between that time period? Like, what was that kind of like?
Yeah, so I did have, 2 seizures immediately after the
Mhm.
surgery, just in recovery. My brain was like, "What's going on?"
Sure.
So, I did have a couple. I also tried to go for a walk and, like, a run too early,
Hmm.
provoked. So, I did have a couple. Some people have brain surgery and never have a seizure again. How cool is that? Like,
Wow.
so that's amazing. That wasn't the
Hmm.
case for me. It didn't
Sure.
totally solve all the things, but so grateful for the ability to be a part of something like that. And,
Hmm.
I had amazing doctors up in Boston who designed the surgery specifically for me. So it was really beautiful. Um, and I had a great experience at Boston Children's, really with that team of doctors and my neurologist or epileptologist, which is an epilepsy specific neurologist. Um, so what was your question, Michael?
No, that was perfect. It was just kind of like explaining post surgery what that was like, and
Okay.
if you don't mind sharing, where are you at with things now?
Yeah, this is, I think, the most important part of this talk. So I had those surgeries, I recovered. I was able to go 4 years without a seizure. And then I had a pretty minor one. And then we went a couple more years, right? And we knew I was independent enough to, do like move. Like we moved to South Carolina. We had a beautiful 3 years there, very independent. I was doing more than I ever had. I did have one seizure while we lived there, but again, kickboxing class. Okay. So then we moved back here to Connecticut, and within 6 months of being here, I had the worst seizure of my life. Again, I don't want to scare anyone because everybody's situation is different, but this one was really traumatic. Like I was fighting for my life through this seizure. And so I'm just trying to be honest and transparent. Not everyone's seizures are like this. I got to the point where I almost envied the person who just woke up and didn't remember anything about their seizure because I wish that I couldn't remember a thing about that seizure. And so I had some post traumatic stress from that. Um, and and that was, again, this was 2 years ago. So for the past 2 years, I for the first time experienced what a depressive episode looks like a real depressive episode, and what real anxiety, this like generalized anxiety disorder is.
Mhm.
And so this is really important for mental health, I think, for people to know. Um, e- Epilepsy does come with sometimes comorbid or co-occurring, like we've talked about in the past, um, conditions. And so for me, and some people, I know there are a lot of people who also have um autism, or right, there is some OCD. Like there are many maybe other health problems, learning disorders, right? Like or learning delays, right? Things like that people do go through at the same time. So there's something else that's going on, other disabilities, other limitations. And for me, this was kind of the first time over the past 2 years where my whole electrical system was completely thrown. It wasn't my reaction to the seizure, it was a product of the seizure. Like the seizure happened and this happened to me. I didn't do any, you know what does that make sense? Am
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
um, I withdrew a lot. I was having, um I was tired all the time. I all of a sudden was having a physiological response. So within my body, I was having a really hard time regulating my system. My whole nervous system was shot. So, like, my heart rate was off, my blood pressure had dropped. I wasn't really able to concentrate for any kind of period of time. They were doing testing on my heart. They were doing, and we're still investigating this. We're still trying to work through this, even though it's been 2 years. Um,
Mm.
the depression was really hard at first, and I think it was a product of fighting for my life. It felt like, right? Like I had this NDE, like this near death experience, and I'm not trying to exaggerate at all. Like this was very real. I was really fighting. Um, and it was really scary. And so, um, the anxiety that built in my body, it and the sadness, I don't even know how it got to the point it did. I really can't even pinpoint that directly, but I'm still healing from that, and I'm grateful for the support I have. I'm still navigating that journey and realizing how very difficult it can be to live with both.
Mhm.
My confidence that we talked about in college and when I was living in South Carolina took a huge hit. Lots more talk about, "Are you sure you can do this? Is this a good idea?" Right? "No, yeah, I'm doing it. Let's go." There was a lot more reservation. I also have had a lot, moving is a big transition, right? There's lots of stressors that were involved too. What am I gonna do with my career? Am I gonna be able to work? Am I not? Um, how much of a break do I have to take? A lot less social interaction because we left all of our friends in South Carolina. Like there were so many changes. Um, and again, a season of life, right? That's part of life. Beautiful things that have grown. My faith, beautiful. Michael's faith. I mean, this journey, I couldn't be more grateful because even though there's been this residue and hardship to kind of navigate, there's been so much growth as well. And kind of knowing that, you know, Jesus is right here going through it with me, and I'm sharing in his pain and suffering and all of that. And also, he wants all good things for me. So, like, coming into alignment with my faith and building that, things that I think can fall away from us easily if we just are like, my life is so great. And we're just going through emotions and I don't need God, right? Because I'm just crushing it. Um, and it really brought me back to my faith a little more or a lot more and has built Michael's. And if that's why all of this had to happen, I'm at peace with that. Like that's
Mhm.
okay with me. Um,
Sure.
and then also I think, Michael and I have been building a lot of trust. Like there's just like a lot there are some real life things. People talk about being together through the good, bad, ugly, like all the things. And the loyalty and love that lives in this home is great and big. So there are beautiful things that have occurred as well. But when we
Mhm.
are in that hardship of depression or anxiety, it's really hard to see that. So
Yeah.
it's taken a lot of work to get to where I am. And I do appreciate everyone who's helped along the way. And I've also been able to understand what's good for me and what's not, right? There's things
Mhm.
that help me out and there are things that don't. So that's been another um building block is having these conversations with people that are like, "Hey, this doesn't help me, but here's what does." Or I know we've talked about it about us advocating for the what we need. And that's something that I think is I've grown I've been able to build that skill of saying, "Hey, this isn't about you, right? This is there's nothing this is about me. This is what I need to do and I'm doing what's best for me and not just pleasing other people." So I've moved away from that need to please others and making sure that I'm taking care of my health and myself and my family.
Yeah. Paige, I appreciate all that and appreciate your explanation and everything. And, you know, there's so much there. Um,
Oops.
there's so much. um, One being the near death experience, two being the mental health, three being the following since then. Um, I guess, I'm my brain my brain is a little is trying to figure out where to go from there because I think it's intense, right? Like it's not easy. But the person that you are today and the things that have come from that, like you were saying with Michael and your faith and the beauty, speaks a lot to your character as a person, as an individual. Um, and I am very fortunate to be able to call you a friend and knowing that everything that you've been through. And I'm not trying to make this like sappy and like, oh my God.
Oh, it was
But
sweet though.
um but I do think like for our listeners, hearing the raw vulnerability of what's been going on is important because I'm sure the people listening to this podcast have seen or experienced or been through something that's been traumatic in their life as well. Not to the same extent, because obviously everybody's situation is different. But there's a lot of things that I think people can take away from all that. Um, yeah.
Okay. I think what's needed, just one more moment, is to your comment of who we are as people. It's easy to lose sight of that sometimes. I had a really good friend of mine. I had opened up about like, hey, am I ready for this? And this was like a recent thing that I'm pursuing. Am I ready for this? And he said to me, Paige, there's never been a mountain that's been in front of you that you haven't climbed.
Mm.
And he had described me to, this was through an interview process, and he told me this, and he's so funny. I really adore this person. Um, she's lightning in a bottle. And when I heard him say those things, I almost didn't believe that he was talking about me. And it's so interesting because that mindset from total confidence of I believe those things to being very vulnerable and a little withdrawn from who I actually am, it's very easy for that to happen. So I think
Mhm.
for people who are listening, like we have to always work towards that mindset of understanding who we are aside from the things that happen to us. I don't care if it's, you know, a seizure, you have a condition, or if it's just life is hard. Like life throws everybody something. We're not alone in having a condition. Like everybody is dealing with their own things, and that is 100% true and valid. And if we really lose sight of who we are, it's easy to get lost. And so I think one thing I would want people to know is now that you've heard my entire story, which I know there's so much more to explore, but at the same time, I want this to be helpful too, is that we constantly have to strive and work towards getting back to who we are outside of the things that happen to us. The world is going to keep throwing stuff at us. Um, that's how this world is. But if I can remember, you are a Paige, you're a daughter of God, of the Most High. You are lightning in a bottle. Go get them, girl. Like if I can like come back to that and just exude some of the goodness that I know I have, and maybe some people it's really hard to picture doing that right now, and that's okay. But working towards that, and it's a constant effort. You can do it. You can get there. We can all get there. And life might have to look a little different, and we might have a new season of life, but you're lightning in a bottle. Let's
You
go.
are.
We
You
all
are.
are. Like I'm saying we
Yeah.
all are, right? Like you
Sure.
are. And you have something to offer,
Mhm.
whether it's to you, your family, to the world, you do. And that's something I can't emphasize enough to our listeners, people who are feeling dim in their hope or faith. Like you do have something to offer. And I hope that this can just be a sweet little reminder that you're lightning in a bottle. And yeah,
There's nothing left for me to say.
that's it.
That's it.